So this is the 100th episode. Do you have any questions for me?
Yes, Rich.
Okay.
First and foremost, again, congratulations on triple digits. A feat to be celebrated and applauded, and have some whiskey and a cigar tonight or tomorrow, whenever you can.
I'm gonna be in Miami when this episode releases, so I will have a cigar and some drinks then.
Maybe a Cubano sandwich or something, tacos, burritos, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear what's one surprising thing that you've learned about the podcast industry through your first 100 episodes.
The podcast industry,
or just podcasting.
It's such a big industry now, like over $1 billion. There's something for everybody there. And I feel like it's more of a like relationship industry. I've known like, for me, listening to podcasts in the past, I developed like a sense of, I develop like a relationship with the host, even though like they don't know me. But every time I play an episode, their voice just like soothes me, and I feel relieved and like, oh, this is so great. And there's so many different formats, and everybody now, it's you have this $1 billion industry, but the barrier to entry is low, so anybody can join. So you have, like a mom who's interested in like crafts and hobbies, and she can start a podcast, or you have the New York Times and huge Fortune 500 companies, media companies, they have their own thing, celebrities, athletes. So it has this platform, and people can find whatever they want specifically. And there's all different like types. There's like infinite options. So for like me, because people have all these ideas about podcasts and like, oh, what are you going to do to monetize it and stuff? And it's like, that's not what I'm doing here. I kind of model what I'm doing off of just like the podcast that I like. So, like a Tim Ferriss, or like I'll take like interviews and kind of interviews and do it similar to like Tim Ferriss, but I'll structure it in a way like Bill Simmons, and then I'll use this from Dan Patrick. So all like my favorite influences, I can like put them all together to create my own one. And I think that, and then that like, from the feedback I've got, people like the like small and like snackable ones.
I do.
So there's something for everybody, and everybody kind of finds their thing. I think the barrier. Go ahead.
No, I think the biggest point is you figured out, which is, I think in hindsight makes so much sense and obvious, but obviously you doing it on a weekly basis, figuring out that it really is creating, cultivating, and building a rich relationship with your listeners. And that makes perfect sense. If you think of like radio and some of the oldest and most memorable disc jockeys, you really did feel like they were talking to you, right? Because you didn't have the visual aid of, even when you watch talking heads on, whether it's like ESPN or like an HBO weekly series like John Oliver Tonight, and you also hear the audience or the laugh track, right? So there isn't as much as that one-to-one, or even if it's like there is no audience and they're still just talking to you, you still just don't feel it. It's just something different to have like somebody in your ears and you feel like they're talking to you, and that's like such a valuable relationship. And with the podcast that I listen to on a consistent basis, I do feel like I know these people. Obviously, like I know you extremely well, but I feel like I know you even more after listening to your podcast. And that's so powerful and makes so much sense.
I think something I found is that it's helped me also kind of explore what I'm interested in. I'm interested in so many different things. And I think that's what's, with podcasts, there's so many different kinds, and it's like, some are like super niche and very specific. So people go to that for that specific information. And then you can kind of like, I don't want to say like games. No, not that. But it's like, for me, I'm using it in a way to express myself and learn more and grow. And it takes longer to kind of build that when I'm not focused on one particular category, because I just want to do what interests me. And it's really, for me, a platform to just explore. But when I look back at the episodes, I can kind of see a pattern within these and what the groove that these are all kind of falling into. So it's kind of surprising to see, where I think it's like it's so general because they're all kind of over the place. But when I look at it, to me, there is a pattern. I don't know if other people see it that way, because one day we'll talk about we'll have Carolina George, who's a young adult author, on, and then the next time we'll be talking about the Global Cities Index and things like that. I just it's been a lot of fun to explore that. And sometimes it'll be like, I don't know if this fits on, it's something I'm just thinking about recently. And it's like, why not? Why not record it? Just put it on. Why not? See what happens.
No, that's great. That's great. And I mean, I'm sure, and you kind of alluded to this, but I'm sure you've grown tremendously over these 100 episodes. And that was kind of my second question is, personally, like, what is there something that you've been surprised to learn about yourself, whether it's we were talking about this earlier, but the reinforcing and understanding that you really don't like the nitty-gritty weeds of like organization of the data and the files, or something even something larger that was an aha moment. What personally have you learned about yourself?
I would say, going back to that a little bit, it's like, I do see what I'm interested in most. I don't see it sometimes big picture wise. It's like, oh, I'm really interested in this lately, and I want to learn more about that. So I do something on that. But then when you look at the aggregate on the platform, okay, that's kind of what that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in, with the like kind of nitty gritty. Let's see. I would say, so like learning more about seeing what I'm interested in most and just exploring that. The consistency, I would say, like, I'm pretty critical of myself, and like, to me, like, 100's cool, but like, if we're talking thousands, then like 100, what does 100 mean? But I think you learn a lot and grow. And even with COVID, here's the thing.
Break it down.
I don't know how much of my growth is the podcast itself, or like everything else. Everything else I'm doing, and COVID accelerating so much of what I'm doing, so we start the podcast. You were the first podcast, like 53, where we decided to put like just a camera. Let's put a camera on it, right? And then so now we have this visual component. It used to be, it started, we would just go to like coffee shops with Chicagoans, and it would just be me and the person just sitting across from each other with the mics. Then I edit it and then put it up. And then COVID, now you have Zoom. So now everybody's more comfortable using like remote, but I still love that in person. So then it's like, okay, let's just put a lot of the podcasts I like, you know, I'll watch some of the stuff on YouTube. If there's a visual component, I think that's makes it just a little bit more interesting, even if it's just like one camera. So then we try that.
Absolutely.
Well, then it's like, well, what if we add another one? Or what if we add another one? Well, now we got a whole lighting setup, and we have 3 DSLRs, and then now we're producing someone else's podcast because they see like what we do. And it's just like this, it's just, I don't know how much of it is the podcast specifically or just like everything else that I'm doing. And the just reveals itself sometimes on the podcast. If that makes any sense. I think it's such an easy thing to do or break into. But do you continue? Like, do you have, you know, do you go through that process of getting better and doing it? And, you know, people are always obsessed about numbers. People focus too much on where they are now and comparing themselves to whatever. You're going to compare yourself to a podcast that's been out for like 3 years. Like, why would you do that? So when people want to know the numbers of the podcast, I'm like, I don't even care about the numbers of the podcast. Because to me, am I getting better? And are the numbers growing? Yes and yes.
That's
so
all that
why,
matters,
you know, nothing else really matters. And everything, a lot of it is like tied up with people's idea of money, I think. A lot of people will want to get into podcasting or whatever it may be because they want to monetize right away. And they, you know, they saw someone else do it on this website and they give you the step-by-step of like how to do it and everything. But I think most importantly is the product itself and the relationships that you have with your audience and your listeners. And I don't think that can really be forced. It has to like be earned and grow over time. And I think something that I'm trying to work on is consistency and being more consistent with the episodes and what days they come out and then what type of content comes out on different days. If I'm trying to monetize it right away or something like that, like some things you don't do for the money, you do it because you want to do it. And if you want to do it, then you will do what it takes to keep doing it and enjoying it and grow it. And most of the things that I do, including the podcast, are all like long-term moves, not really short-term. So it's more about creating an infrastructure, and when stuff happens, it will happen. And in the meantime, just keep doing your thing. You know?
Yeah. And I've appreciated that as I've been listening from day one is you truly are trying to see what works and trying all different angles and concepts. And it's clear that you are fine tuning the product, and the product for this is a podcast, right?
Yeah.
And how can you start monetizing something if you don't really know what that something is just yet, if you don't know what that product is? And so I love your approach to that. And I wish more people would take that approach to not just podcasting, but any project that they're starting out. You know, don't be afraid to like just start and see what happens. You can always change it. You know, nothing's going to be perfect from the get-go. And so, applaud you again for putting stuff out there and being consistent with it, because sooner or later something's going to hit and you're going to find your niche and you're going to look at the data and you're going to look at the podcast and be like, oh, I really like this one, this one, this one. Or you can see like which ones your listeners are gravitating towards to most, and improve from there and only get better. So
some of the stuff is so like interesting too, to see like, oh, that's interesting. People listen the most on Spotify, yet when I listen to podcasts, it's Apple Podcasts.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But it's like overwhelmingly more Spotify, and just like all these little things, and like, oh, that episode did that, or that, you know, it's just, it's so interesting. It's so fun too.
What's
really
the, we can cut this out if you don't want to reveal, but what's the most listened to podcast of the 100?
I actually don't know.
Oh, that's cool.
It's so been a while since I looked at.
You weren't lying when you said you didn't care about the listeners, or didn't care about the numbers.
Yeah, I know on YouTube, my friend Felipe came on, and he's like the 4th most watched video on YouTube. And I was like, I tell him, I joke with him. So I go, Felipe, so you're oh no, he surpassed her. I was like, my most popular episodes on YouTube are you, and then Kat Kennedy from NASA. So it's you and someone from NASA that are top 2. But so it's, you know, this is the podcast, and then YouTube is like a whole different ball game. And
I bet.
It's just like, so I have this motto in my head, and that's attack the learning curve. So something that prevents people from starting is they have this idea of like, oh, this is gonna be so hard. I know nothing about it, but I got nothing to do during COVID. So I just, well, I got to figure it out. Right. So and it's just like, just feeling like an idiot every day, and like being uncomfortable, feeling like a dummy, but you just have to keep learning about how to do all these different things. So attack the learning curve is kind of what I think about a lot.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I've been wanting to start executing and just putting out more like creative work. And in Chicago, I was heavily involved with like improv and that scene, and that like really helped me flex my creative muscles. And you always want to, obviously, like, it doesn't matter if you're an artist, photographer, musician, improv, podcaster, you always obviously want to be better, right? But you only get better by, you get a lot better by just doing it and just learning from your mistakes. And it's really hard to come to terms with like being bad and then learning from that, right?
You have to be humble and kind of remove your ego from it and approach it, you know, objectively.
And and for those people that can be bad unapologetically and know that they're going to improve and know that it's just part of getting better, and just kind of taking it as just understanding it's all part of the process, and kind of leaning it into that, and like embracing the bad, embracing the scrappiness, and embracing the growth and the beginning stages, which is really, really hard to do. I think it's easier as you get older because you've lived through some shit, right? And you have some more experience and you're wiser. But it still is a challenge. But again, props for you to making it to 100 episodes, because I bet you feel a hell of a lot more confident and have learned a shit ton in these first 100. And here's to another 100 and 1,000.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on and being the 100th episode.